Coming up,
Paul OBrien, startup consultant, founder of MediaTech Ventures, and our first robot man.
Morning. This is the future, isn't it?
You are a bit of a futurist.
I just think of myself as trying to keep up.
Right.
The faster I can fail, the better.
Everything's a business. An idea is maybe only as good as an idea that you can sell.
Right.
What's a good pitch?
Whether it's venture capital or a sponsorship or a grant, a lot of different entities want to participate in this ecosystem. It's challenging to understand how.
Let's talk a little bit about data.
The role of the CMO has changed.
You're a CMO, you get a new job. What's the first thing that you should do?
The best way to leverage the media is to just think about yourself.
success doesn't happen by accident. John Emisodi talks with real media geniuses on Conversations with Giants.
Joining me today is startup consultant Paul OBrien. He's the founder of MediaTech Ventures, which works with brands, startups, and agencies to scale ideas and businesses. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Giants. We're here in Austin, Texas this week with South by Southwest. We have a great guest today, Paul OBrien, PartTime CMO, startup consultant, founder of MediaTech Ventures, and our first robot man that we've ever interviewed on the show. So I'm very excited. This is actually, I'm a little scared. It's like when the Terminator comes to ask your name.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I like doing this because it lets me augment reality and get a better sense for what's in the room and what we're up to today. Seeing the things that we can change and how they look.
Because regular reality kind of sucks.
Right? Well, yeah, so. it would seem so, wouldn't it? Right. but the challenge, of course, is you can't see anything with these things on. So you sit here effectively in the dark unless you're watching something, and that's why I got these very slick set.
Wow.
Morning.
Good.
Let me see where we're at.
Now it's real. All right.
This is the future, isn't it? That we change the way we interact with,
I think partially.
with reality.
Well, that's actually kind of what's cool. I mean, you are a bit of a futurist. Let's start exactly with what MediaTech Ventures is.
Sure.
Kind of explain a little bit what's going on with this company.
I'd love to. It's there's a challenge in our economy with understanding the pace at which technology changes. Mm-hmm. A challenge in that it changes so fast that you need futurists, which, thank you. I don't think of myself as a futurist. I just think of myself as trying to keep up.
Right.
and I do that because I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley. And I started my career actually in media, but by way of the technology, working with Yahoo and this early streaming businesses out of broadcast.com. And Yahoo launched one of the old early music platforms. And so I've always been enamored with the fact that technology and media, whether it's entertainment media or industrial media, ways to see things, ways to hear things, that they're intrinsically intertwined with technology. Mm-hmm. That technology makes it work, enables us to produce, enables us to do this, enables us to reach audiences. And that's a challenge, though, for the artists, for the talent, for the creative, for the designers, right. To stay on top of those things. And so MediaTech Ventures works with universities, works with cities and states, works with venture capitalists to help folks understand where the money's moving and why, help folks keep up with things like virtual reality and where the opportunity exists, and really just endeavors to keep us moving towards that future, keep us entertained, keep us enjoying music.
Right.
Not being so frustrated with how it gets disrupted, and instead understanding what new technologies enables us to do to enjoy it, to monetize it.
So this is really cool because a lot of times we talk on this show, we're advertising marketing,
right.
And we talk about a model that is 50 years old. It's changing rapidly or attempting to change rapidly,
right.
Maybe having a hard time sometimes keeping up with the way the world's changing.
Yep.
And basically, you're a guy who, to people who are out there, is like, I don't know if there's anything in that for me or whatever, but I have an idea that I think could be good. They can come to you and you can help them formulate the idea, polish the idea, and find money to make it a reality.
Really, the last part is what we strive for.
Okay.
And not necessarily just money, but resources, right? Who are the folks? Who are the skilled professionals? Who are the editors, if you're developing a film? Who are the software developers who can deal with augmented reality or video games?
Right.
Who are the talented folks that understand this technology? Where does the money move because of that? Whether it's whether it's venture capital or a sponsorship or a grant. A lot of different entities want to participate in this ecosystem. It's challenging to understand how.
Right.
And so we work to help them figure that out and make a difference.
So you hit on something that's really pretty interesting to everybody. Creative people in particular sometimes aren't the best business people.
Sure.
Or don't necessarily have that sense.
Sure.
But everything that you've talked about so far is like where the money is, where the money moves. Everything's a business. An idea is maybe only as good as an idea that you can sell.
Sure.
Talk to me a little bit about, you talk about the perfect pitch. When people have an idea, I hear this all the time from bankers or whatever, they can go in and it's like, I don't know, there was no meat on the bones, or the pitch was bad.
Right.
What's a good pitch?
Understanding your audience. It all comes down to understanding your audience, and that touches on why we're so passionate about media in general. You mentioned advertising and marketing earlier, and how it's changing. Fundamentally, advertising and marketing isn't changing. Our methodology, our tools are changing, but at the end of the day, it's all about understanding your audience and delivering the right message in the right forum, in the right format. The perfect pitch, the imperfect pitch tends to miss that. Tends to start by explaining what it is that you're doing. I want to build an application to help musicians find great venues in Austin. And that's a great idea. That's a noble idea. And yet, if you're a bank, if you're a venture capitalist, if you're a large advertising sponsor, you're immediately going to wonder how well that's going. How much traction do you have? Do you have customers? Can you show it to me yet? Is it ready?
Right.
As opposed to appreciating that the audience for such a thing in this context is somebody's going to write a check, and they're going to need a return of some kind. So instead, what's the opportunity? The opportunity is that there are an exceptional number of historic, creative, modern, metropolitan, major and minor venues for musicians in a place like Austin. There are hundreds of them. How do you find the best experience for a musician who perhaps can't afford very much?
Right.
How do you find the best experience for a talented band that can easily pull together 10,000 people?
Right.
Do you need all of the traditional models? Do you need the entire team of folks that puts together a concert for you?
Right.
Because of technology today, you don't.
Right.
We work in that space. Right?
Okay.
There's a decent lead to a pitch, I think. We work in that space. We're going to make that possible.
Right.
For musicians to throw their own events, throw their own concerts, and find their own audience, find their own voice successfully, substantially.
Right.
Who doesn't want to get behind that?
Right. Well, that's cool. I mean, that takes, again, a couple things of advertising. Like, good advertising marketing is always about knowing who you're talking to.
Yep.
And then the part you add on to it is, to creative people, a good idea isn't enough. There has to be an ability. We're in a capitalist society.
Sure.
There has to be an ability to monetize and make money.
Right.
Because other people don't necessarily just get off on like, wow, what a cool idea that would be, even if it made no money.
True.
So,
True. Well, and that's why I think the perfect pitch starts that way.
Right.
Because the way you fail to reach an audience is to start with something that someone will disagree with,
Right.
or not be interested in, or not care about.
Right.
How can you communicate in such a way that everybody's going to get excited about what you're doing, whether
Right.
they're actually going to invest or not?
Right.
They at least get the idea. They like the idea. It makes sense. They're willing to help in some way.
Right.
Because you're right. The challenge is that not only are a lot of media entities like bands and filmmakers not necessarily savvy business folks, but frankly, neither are small businesses. Right?
Right.
They're focused on building their restaurant. They're focused on serving their customers
Right.
and dealing with things like accounting and bookkeeping, let alone marketing, understanding AdWords, doing email.
Right.
Not only is it not something most people are familiar with, it's frankly genuinely something that they just don't care about.
Right.
And they shouldn't.
Right,
They're
right.
passionate about what they do.
Right.
And so how can we change that? How can we help them better reach the people that they need to reach in order to be successful by providing some of those services, that technology, those platforms that they don't necessarily even want to learn how to use,
Right.
but they need to.
Right.
They know they need to.
So that's why I call you a futurist, because I think so much what we're seeing in this economy right now, previous generations, maybe you went and worked for a big company and
Sure.
that company would take care of you the rest of your life, your family and stuff.
Yep.
That's just not reality as
No.
much now. There are going to be a lot more entrepreneurial things. The country's changing, the economy's changing. You're a big fan of data. I
Yes.
know that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about like how data helps facilitate some of this stuff, and really the importance of data.
Sure.
Starting with like finding the audience, finding what the reality is.
Right. Sure. That's a wonderful question, because I think in a future sense, I think we get burdened as business owners, as entrepreneurs, we get burdened with the ideas of big data, the ideas of the social graph. What is the social graph?
Right.
We get burdened. We get challenged by the encouragement to use Google Analytics. I don't even know how to start. But apparently, I have to code to use Google Analytics, and I like to encourage folks that the idea of using data and the importance of data is much more simple than that. Ask the questions. And think about where you can get information with regard to those questions. One of the beautiful things that the internet did, in frankly disrupting and making it a little bit more difficult for media, for musicians, one of the beautiful things that the internet actually did was it ushered us into this information age.
Right.
That data comes from simply searching Google. Data comes from asking a question on LinkedIn or on Quora.
Right.
Data comes from building an audience on Facebook, even before you have a business. Build an audience on Facebook and start to pay attention to what they're excited about, what they're paying attention to, what they react to. That'll give you a sense for what you could be doing or should be doing. And then ease your way into the data that's out there. Ease your way into putting analytics on your website.
Right.
Why? Because analytics isn't about measuring conversion rates and where the traffic's coming from and these more sophisticated marketing questions. It really gets back to the basic marketing questions. From physically, where is my audience coming?
Right.
Are people coming from New York? Am I getting an audience out of India?
Right.
What do I do with that? That's magical. That's insightful in terms of figuring out whether or not you should just take a local ad out in the newspaper.
Right.
Should you take a local ad out in the newspaper in Dallas if nobody in Dallas even knows that you exist yet, or they're paying attention? Maybe, maybe not.
So that really is getting at data really in its simplest form
Sure.
that a lot of people don't necessarily realize. CMOs come in and everybody knows now data is everything. I got to get into data.
Right.
I have to get some data. I have to analyze the data. I don't always think that they know exactly what that means.
Right.
But in essence, data is just intelligence.
Yes.
Data is just the truth
Right.
about what's really happening out there.
Right.
That is what I think is like part of what's fascinating about what you're doing, and part of what's fascinating about the disruption in the world right now. Old media, let's look at the last election just as a platform of old media and new media.
Sure.
Old media said this is going to happen, and this is completely going to happen. The left coast and the right coast are saying that this is going to happen.
Right.
Reality comes in, and old media missed it 100%. What is going on? Like, couldn't data have maybe said that, had somebody analyzed it more correctly, that it's like, this isn't the lock that you think it is?
It's a wonderful question, because could data have given us more accurate insight to what was happening? Yes. Data is still not that accessible, though. That the challenge with most of these platforms is it is information. It is truthful, but you still have to understand what it's telling you.
Right.
You still need those CMOs. You still need companies like Epsilon, as I understand. You still need folks that know how to interpret it. And that's what's interesting about the old media world versus the new. The old media world was trained in focus groups and how to interpret studies and how to avoid confirmation bias, right? This tendency that we have to look for data that affirms what we want.
Right.
And the challenge we have with new media is it's actually making it easier for us to make those mistakes.
Right.
It's easier for us to find people on social media who agree with us, therefore I must be right.
Who think the way we do.
Right.
Right.
Everybody else thinks the way I do.
Right.
That must be the answer. And so while data is more available, it's more accessible, we do still have to practice the traditional marketing techniques. Right? That being on AdWords, for example, is not marketing.
Right.
Being on AdWords means you have a marketing channel in place. Whether or not you should, whether or not you're doing it well, whether or not you know what it's doing for you, that's what marketing is. That's what marketing is, and it's challenging.
So it's really, if you use it properly, data can challenge the conventional wisdom if you use it properly, but you have to you have to be willing to look at the good, the bad, the ugly, see it warts and all.
Certainly.
Versus than just the stuff that you agree with.
Certainly, I think so.
Yeah.
And you could argue, I think you could argue that the data in the previous election was there too. It was
Right.
there too. But you have to appreciate, for example, you have to appreciate that the coasts and major cities tend to be a little bit more involved on the internet. They tend to be younger populations. They tend to be more technically involved. And so 10 years ago, certainly 15, 20 years ago when I started on Yahoo, there would certainly be a bias perhaps in information on the internet with regard to politics.
Right.
Because the cities are more involved.
Right.
In this latest election, that's certainly started to change. In fact, the entire world is much more involved on the internet.
Right.
And so we're reaching a point where we can start to measure everybody everywhere.
Right.
Throughout the world and figure out what we might do and
Right.
might want to do, perhaps should do. And some of that bias is being eliminated simply by the fact that our sample size is more inclusive. It's more comprehensive of everyone.
Right.
And so is that what happened in the last election? Our sample size opened up to a lot of people that we weren't
Right.
measuring before, that we
Right.
weren't talking to before.
Or didn't have a voice.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's interesting. Your company, you're Silicon Valley trained.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
Certainly follow both coasts, but
Yep.
you kind of locate right here in the center of America.
Yeah, right.
Is this something too that we're going to see more, again, thinking down the road a little bit? The coast clearly kind of owned the media.
Some.
Yeah, somewhat.
Yeah.
But definitely like the key influencing things. Are we going to start to see, like, because of digital data, all these things, a shift in that way, like to more in the center of America?
We already are.
Okay.
We already are. So MediaTech Ventures is based here, but we don't just work here.
Right.
We're based here for a reason, and it's that we are already seeing that migration. We did a study 5 years ago about the immigration patterns within the country. Where are people moving? And why? And sure enough, they're leaving the coast. They're coming out of Silicon Valley. They're coming out of LA. They're coming out of New York. And they're coming to the central core of the country. They're coming to Chicago. They're coming to Austin. Dallas, Houston are exploding as well. And that struck us as one of the most interesting things that we might ask of what's
Right.
going on in the United States. Not just that they're moving, but who's moving and why.
Right.
Who's moving and why. And what we noticed in Austin, and in the rest of Texas for that matter, is that the folks moving aren't coming out of the front end of the media industry, if that's a good way to characterize it. The actors aren't coming from Hollywood. The anchor folks in the news media industry in New York aren't coming to Texas. The people that are moving are the technical folks, the technical skill sets, the sound engineers, the producers, the video game developers. And what's been fascinating since then is seeing the big companies validate that idea, that Condé Nast moved their digital team to Austin just last year. Comcast is moving their media R&D team to Austin this year. Certain Affinity, who folks should know because they created Halo and Call of Duty, just moved their entire company to North Austin. That the big businesses are realizing that there's a wonderful convergence here, not just of media and technology, but in the creative professionals,
Right.
the artistic professionals, with the coders, with the talent, with the engineers,
Right.
and with the folks leaving the coasts, where yes, they do dominate the media, but they dominate an aspect of the media.
Right.
Nobody thinks of Silicon Valley as being the film industry.
Right.
Because it's not.
Right.
But Austin has a film industry.
Right.
And has software developers and technology professionals.
Right.
And so we're able to rethink. We're able to really embrace and understand what's going on in video here because of that cross-pollination of skill sets and talent and experiences.
So that's cool because, again, like money makes everything move.
Sure.
Money makes stuff happen. If money's going there, if support staff is going there, artists will follow.
Yeah.
And artists also, I mean, there's a reality of like the coast have gotten pretty expensive.
Sure.
So just the fact that a life can be kind of built, someplace more easily.
Yes.
And still have access to the world. That's pretty cool. That's disruptive.
That's disruptive. And what I'm concerned about, what we really get passionate about is again the question of where the capital goes. And So if I put my venture capitalist hat on and take off the MediaTech hat, the venture capitalist in me acknowledges that there actually is a plus side to the fact that the coasts are expensive. And if you think about that, why on earth would that be a positive? Why on earth would the fact that it costs a lot more to hire people be a benefit to the investment community? And it becomes apparent when you compare it to these lower cost economies that if you take a company out of St. Louis or Denver, one of the cheaper economies, less expensive economies, and you take that exact same company and you build it in San Francisco, the exact same company, everything's equal. The fact is, the bottom line is the company in San Francisco is going to have to raise more money.
Right.
They're going to be more aggressive about it. They're going to focus on raising more capital simply to afford what it takes to do there.
Right.
And so when those announcements are made about those two companies raising capital, one has raised $500,000, the other one has raised $3 million.
Right.
Which one does the world pay attention to?
Right.
Which one does the world perceive as having a more substantial opportunity? It's not necessarily the one on the coast.
Right.
Not necessarily, but it looks that way.
Right.
And the challenge in the venture capital ecosystem is that at the end of the day, our job is to raise the capital. Our job is not to write the checks to the startups. That's what angel investors do. Our job is to raise the capital to make it available to entrepreneurs. And so the question of the perception matters to investors. If you're an investor, don't I want to be where they're raising $3 million and delivering billion-dollar returns and these unicorn startups?
Right.
Why would I want to be where things are smaller?
Right.
Well, the short answer is because it is easier to start a business here.
Right.
It is less expensive. It is more likely that you'll have a positive outcome, though it may not be as substantial an outcome.
Right.
And so the importance of the media side of what we're doing, the importance of what you're doing, is educating all sides of the economy,
Right.
all sides of the equation.
Right.
That there's a cost and benefit, there's a pro and con to just about everything.
Right.
Make sure you understand where you are and why.
Right.
Where you are and why.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation, and also is really kind of getting into the complexities of business, data, creativity, and how they come together. And we're going to keep it going.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break
Good.
from our sponsor, and then we'll come back and really tear this thing apart.
Look forward to it.
All right. Thank
Cheers.
you. We're back with Paul O'Brien, talking a lot about the fascinating new world, new economy. One thing that you talk about, you say, in addition to all the other things that you do, that you're a part-time CMO.
Sure.
So, tough job anymore. CMOs are like, full-time CMOs have a very short lifespan, it seems like, in these big businesses. The average now, they're saying, is like 24 months or something like that.
Right.
Let's start to delve into this world a little bit.
Sure.
What exactly, like, you're a CMO, you get a new job, what's the first thing that you should do?
Grasp the breadth of what a company is doing,
Okay.
of what the business is doing. And I mean the breadth, you know, the financials, the hiring practices, the trends in the industry, of course. CMOs know that part. But I find that most marketing professionals don't necessarily embrace the fact that their job is product development as much as it is audience development. And the only way to do that well for a business is to be as intimately involved as the CEO. There have been some wonderful articles written about the idea that the CMO is the new CEO. That this discussion we've been having about data
Sure.
and the importance of marketing is ever more significant than it used to be.
Sure.
How can you run a company well if you aren't wearing that hat of chief marketing officer?
Right.
And I think that the reason that it changes so much, the reason that the lifespan of a CMO seems short, is because things change so quickly. You know, that the ability to keep up with what Facebook's going to do tomorrow,
Right.
or the best way to manage your CRM with your Salesforce, it's going to be completely different in a month.
Right.
And so companies to some extent rightly need to transition. need to
Right.
transition through folks as they grow.
Right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
That's why this idea of part-time has merit. We are a more entrepreneurial ecosystem. How does an entrepreneur get the experience and the talent and the resources they need at the time they need it,
Right.
on demand, at a cost they can manage?
So you're talking about something that I think is interesting. The CMO, the CMO of today, his or her job is much more complicated than the CMO of yesterday.
Sure. Yes.
That used to be, to simplify it to its most simple, a CMO used to be really in charge of the company's message, its narrative, and it would have relatively few outlets for that. You'd put out some TV ads, you'd put out some print ads, you'd hopefully arrive at a campaign idea that kind of worked.
Right.
People were more or less forced to see it. That's completely off the table now. And I think what's really happened is a CMO is a growth officer. Now companies really look at like marketing is really a growth engine, and how I need to make sure that this brand is selling, right?
Right.
That's a huge thing, the money trail.
It is a huge thing, and yet I still believe passionately that the challenge we have is that the internet changed everything,
Right.
and we're still simply trying to figure out what that means.
Right. Right.
That the role of the CMO has changed, but not as substantially as it might seem, in the sense that what we simply have are more resources,
Right.
more options at our disposal.
Right.
Whether or not you should put an ad on Google is the same question as to whether or not you should put an ad on a billboard off
Right.
of the freeway.
Right.
We have the means now of better measuring which of those things works and why.
So that really is the key. A CMO of the future or of now
Yeah.
really needs to take this data thing seriously, because you really need to kind of look at like where these buyers are, how they're acting, because it's a lot different than it used to be. But if you use that, then the job becomes much what it was anyway.
Anyway,
It's
exactly.
still building the narrative and still putting the narrative out there, but it's just putting it out in a different way than you typically think about it.
Yep. And you have to appreciate that today, someone is going to have a VR headset on.
Right.
that the consumer, that even your potential partner, if you're in B2B or an enterprise company, your audience is being bombarded and has access to just as many opportunities as you do,
Right.
as the marketing professional. How can you possibly reach them all through
Right.
any one channel? The
Right.
answer is you can't.
Right.
You absolutely can't. It's all the more reason you have to understand who your customer is, who your audience is,
Right.
and how to reach them, how and where to reach them. One of the most exciting examples of that we've discovered is how efficient and effective and inexpensive radio
Right.
still remains.
Right.
You know, folks
Right.
want to say that podcasting is disrupting radio, and it's not. It's new, it's exciting. It's no more disrupting radio than the internet actually disrupted print.
Sure.
Right? Do we
Sure,
not
sure.
use print anymore? No,
Sure.
we actually certainly do still use print.
Right.
It's very different,
Right.
but we certainly still use it. And the exciting fact in that context is, if you think about it instead of as just audio, your business, how does your business reach people through audio? Well, you're podcasting. You can stream yourself pretty easily. And radio, hyper-local radio, is paid
Right.
attention to. It's listened
Right.
to. It's relatively inexpensive. It's a great medium that we've disregarded a bit
No, I
because of
agree.
our fascination with
agree.
video and the internet.
I agree. And it's a captive audience.
Right.
If you look at traffic times
Yeah.
in big urban cities
Yep.
and stuff right now, those are just going up and up and up.
Right.
And you have a captive audience for an hour that you can reach efficiently. That's a great medium.
Brilliant. It's brilliant for local businesses.
And
in
it's
particular.
a mass medium.
Right.
You know,
Right.
there is a difference, isn't there? Like as we talk about digital, we get into the world of content and stuff, but the mass media still has a place because people react differently to a mass message than to a personal message.
Sure.
It still galvanizes in a different way, right?
It does. I think what's been interesting to watch with regard to the implication of mass media is evident in news and with journalists, in that the idea of citizen journalism, and the idea that anyone can write a blog, and the idea that anybody can have an audience on social media has done a number on the news. It really has. But we're waking up to the fact that noise, breadth of content isn't necessarily the same as quantity, or as quality.
Quality of content.
Quality of content.
Right.
And what's exciting about the media industry and things like 360 video and live streaming and podcasting is that the expectation that I think the audience has of media professionals like yourself, right? The on-air individual, the expectation has shifted from being someone to whom we just subscribe, to whom we just listen to, we just read the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
Now I want to tweet with Walt Mossberg. I want to go to an event with some 360 gear on where I can see Kara Swisher.
Right.
And maybe even chat with her.
Right.
That the role of media is changing. The media professional is changing from that of merely being one way, outbound, right, to being two way. And I think that's exciting because we're realizing that the amount of information is valuable because it's data.
Right.
And as a consumer of information, I can now have a personal experience, not just with a news journalism, but the same is true of a musician, the same is true of an actor, the same is true of a designer or a video game developer, that my experience with your brand is different. I can now talk to you. I can now enjoy my experience with you, really get to know you, and better appreciate what you're saying and whether or not I believe or agree with what you're saying. It brings a new way of finding credibility in the news.
So quality of content, though, is the key to making it all work.
Unequivocally.
Because it was a Wild West show. At first, everybody was out there and putting stuff out, and it was like, oh my God, anybody can do this. But it did just become what we used to call clutter, noise. And now, like, even a brand, a good brand has an opportunity like never before because it's going to have some credibility and ability to, like, well, I want to engage with them.
What's fun and exciting to watch is how these mediums are available to everyone, and how it's then difficult and challenging, though, to figure out where best to represent your brand, where as a business, as a musician, to show yourself off, to be a part of that experience. I for example, I like to write, and I've got a decent sized audience on Twitter because of that. Folks all the time tell me that I should be doing a video series on YouTube. Well, that's not my thing. That's not how I work. And so it's exciting to chat with startups and business professionals and entrepreneurs about the idea that the best way to leverage the media is to just think about yourself. Just think about your person. Right? Don't think about the business and the brand. Think about what you do, what you're comfortable with. If you're not the type of person to be engaging on Facebook, don't worry about being on Facebook. You don't have to be everywhere, because though your audience is now everywhere and is easily distracted, what people are looking for is that engagement, that personal experience with you as a brand.
That's actually a huge thing. We talk about it too. You're hitting on the notion of reinvention. You constantly have to reinvent, right? Just especially now in this new age, it's like you can't fail for very long the way you used to.
Two thoughts, if I could give you one. I love the idea of reinvention first because you might get a sense for it, but I actually started out in radio, and so I'm very passionate about that side of the industry. Ended up in the internet because of Yahoo. And because of Yahoo, I ended up in e-commerce in Hewlett-Packard. So I reinvented myself a couple times early in my career. Ended up in Hewlett-Packard and the search marketing industry. So I've got the online media aspect to what I'm doing too. And in working in e-commerce, I failed a lot. I failed substantially on a couple of occasions. And what it taught me, though, was how to discover myself. How to realize that I ended up in e-commerce at Hewlett-Packard because it was the right fit at the right time. I was good at it. I could help them with what they needed at that time. But it wasn't really me. It wasn't
Right.
It didn't really represent who I am.
Right.
It took me a while to figure out that my roots were at this convergence, back with my radio experience, back with my online media experience, tying those things together.
Right.
Tying those things together. And what I challenged was your second thought, though. The way that we can do that, the way that we can discover ourselves, the way that it's an interesting way to think about it. The way I define success is not avoiding failure. It's not overcoming
Right.
failure. It's not the opposite of failure. It's in fact being comfortable with it.
Right.
Being comfortable in your own skin, recognizing that no amount of success that I might have or you might have will still result in failure.
Right.
I'm still going to make some mistakes.
Sure.
We're going to make some bad decisions. And that's okay, because now I'm doing what I love. I'm doing
Right.
what I'm passionate about. And so the faster I can fail, frankly, I think the better.
Right.
I think the better. Let's try things. Let's move. Let's
Right.
pivot. Let's recognize. Let's use data. Let's recognize when we shouldn't do that anymore.
Right.
And
Right.
go back and do something different that might work.
So that's really the crux of it for an entrepreneur or an entrepreneurial thinker, embracing the fear, because you're going to have fear at first,
Right.
but then knowing that you're going to fail, the fear kind of goes away, and you turn that into learning.
Right.
That in essence becomes your own data.
Right. Local entrepreneur, the president of Indeed, beautiful search platform, a search technology for finding jobs and recruiting. The president was on the radio. Just last week I heard him on the radio, and he said, the epitome of a good entrepreneur is equal parts Don Quixote and Mr. Spock.
Okay.
You have to wake up in the morning, every morning, certain that everybody else is wrong,
Right.
that your dream is right,
Right.
that no one can tell you no.
Right.
But then also looking at things logically, looking at the data,
Right.
and making conclusions based
Right.
on what's happening very, very quickly. That's the only way to overcome the fear, I think, is
Right.
to have that overconfidence, perhaps.
Sure.
That I don't necessarily exactly know what I'm doing, but I know we're doing it right.
Right.
And I know we're going to make it, and I know we're going to succeed.
Right.
And let me go check and make sure that we are actually doing that.
being very left brain, right brain.
Exactly.
You know, you have to do that. I think you hit on another notion that is important, especially like as a young person. You kind of have to have a strategy on like what success looks like to you in a way,
sure.
as a person. But you're constantly reevaluating yourself to find like, okay, what are my core strengths? What am I good at? What am I not good at? Because sometimes I think of myself as a young man. I thought I was good at everything. I thought like, no, I could do that. I can do that.
Right.
But as life goes on, as you fail, you do kind of come back to like, well, I can sort of do everything, but here's like the 1 to 5 things that I'm actually maybe really good at or better than other people. Does that sound familiar?
It sounds important. It sounds critical. And it does come from our experiences as children, frankly. I'm involved with a wonderful new program here called Pitch a Kid. Pitch a Kid, where entrepreneurs, startup founders, our age, have to get in front of an audience of kids and give them their pitch to talk back to that idea of the pitch. And the feedback, the questions, the challenges that kids will give an experienced professional. They don't care if you're Bill Gates. They will ask you the most eye-opening, brilliant questions because they don't have that fear.
Right.
And they're willing to make those mistakes because they don't see them yet as mistakes. They don't see them yet as failures. They see them as questions, an opportunity to learn.
Right.
And I was no football player. I tried to be. Right? Everybody wants to play football. I was no football player, so I didn't try for too long. I discovered that I was pretty good at swimming, and so I got into swimming. That philosophy, that childhood spirit, that desire to learn, that desire to build. That's what we need to retain. That's what STEM education needs to retain. That as kids grow up and go through university systems, that doesn't get beaten out of them. Right. That you retain the exhilarance for asking questions
Right.
and making some mistakes,
Right.
and finding what's right for you.
And good for a successful business person to realize, I think, that no matter how high you get up or how good you think you are, you really have to surround yourself with some people who aren't afraid to say the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Because
I like to use the "your baby is ugly" reference, which we use in the startup community a lot. I love your pitch; it's a good idea. It's a little ugly,
right.
because the fact is that's helpful,
Right.
right? Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
A little too much praise, a little too much exuberance for what you're doing can be a bad thing.
Right.
Frankly, especially as an entrepreneur.
Right.
You need to avoid, not intentionally, but you need to be able to step around and identify those mistakes.
Right.
And so it's critical to have people around you who, frankly, are better at what you're doing than you are. I
Right.
believe the CEO's job is to find people much more capable than they are.
Right.
And that strategy, the strategy is how the CMO, how the CEO, how the CTO helps do that, right? They provide a North Star
Right.
that the team, the experienced, talented team of folks that can code or design or build or communicate more effectively than they can.
Right.
They're the ones who build the company.
Right.
Based on that objective, based on that
Right.
North Star. And again, we're going to deviate left and we're going to deviate right. We're just going to keep you on the same track.
That's a good management insight too, because I think that the big problem a lot of managers make, no matter what it is, micromanaging, thinking that they have to do every single part,
Right.
and that's actually absolutely wrong.
It's entirely wrong.
Right.
It's entirely wrong. And it's most difficult in the context of this newer theme of a lean startup, a bootstrap startup, and chasing customers and revenue and selling things quickly, right? Find revenue quickly, because at the end of the day, the founder or the CEO of a business will always be the best salesperson
Right.
for
right,
whatever
right,
that is.
Right.
And yet, as the CEO or the founder of a business, you've got a million other things you need to be doing.
Right.
Right? And at the end of the day, as you bring on sales professionals, even if it's the best sales professional in the world, it's entirely likely that they're not as good as you at selling your own thing.
Right.
Because you can make whatever decision you want.
Right, right,
I can
right.
sit down with you and say, yep, we'll take that deal, we'll sign right now and close some business. And so the CEO, the small business owner absolutely has to get comfortable
Right.
with realizing that they are incapable of building a business on their own shoulders.
Right.
That you need those professionals who have the experience, have the reputation of being excellent
Right.
in your industry, so that again, so you can steer the ship,
Right.
and they can run it.
Right.
They can make sure it doesn't sink.
Right. Great lesson. Kind of as we wrap up, just one final thing, if we could encapsulate it. I think everybody who comes to you or whatever, it's like, I want to start a business and I want it to be successful.
Sure.
If somebody had to just say, if you could tell them one thing, like, this is what it takes to be successful. I know it's a lot of things, but is there a North Star of success?
Is there a North Star of success? I think I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek's work. Start with why. I'm also a big fan of an old economist, Peter Drucker's work. He wrote a book called Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which most people these days don't read because it was written back in the 80s. And so we're on to new startup books these days. You read those two books, and I think it answers that question, that Peter Drucker made the point that only two things matter. Only two things create value in business. Innovation, which we've been talking about, and marketing, which we've been talking about. And he added, marketing is the one that distinguishes the businesses, right? We want to think that it's the innovation, that if you invent something, you've got something distinct. But it's actually not that, it's the marketing, right? Apple is not Hewlett-Packard.
Right.
Because of the marketing, right? Because of the marketing, because of the experience and the brand. And the only way to arrive at that is to understand the why. Understand your why.
Right.
Why is it that we're doing this? Why is it that anyone will care? Why is it that a bank or an investor or a customer or a partner will care? Why is it that we're going this direction and not that direction?
Right.
That's the most difficult question to ask.
Right.
But it's also the most important because how you do what you're doing, what you do, when you do things,
Right.
Where,
Right.
whether or not you do it in Chicago or in Austin or in Silicon Valley,
Right.
depends first on understanding why you're doing it.
Right.
Right? So start with why, and appreciate that the idea of both innovation and marketing are critical to that path.
Right.
Are critical to that path. Those three things, though, why, marketing, and innovation are what are going to get you there.
Right.
And start with those things before you even invest $1
Right.
in filing an LLC,
Right.
filing a patent, building a company. Start with those fundamental questions because that's what it will foster the passion
Right.
that other people have for
Right.
what you're doing.
I love it. Actually, I think that fits completely with just the notion of what advertising marketing was always about. It's we tell the narrative, and whatever you make, there's a narrative that makes it different, and stick to the narrative. And we talk about that a lot in our own company, so I think that's a fascinating way of looking at it.
Good. I look forward to hearing these stories, these narratives that you guys are putting together here. We're trying to tell a lot more stories
Yep.
Out of Austin,
Yep.
and there's some great video experiences, blogs, podcasting, and audio experiences
Yeah.
coming out of this part of the world because, as you can imagine, as we think about those narratives and where they're coming from, everybody's wondering why and how Texas is doing so well.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to be a part of telling those stories, whether or
Yeah.
not it's through the venture capital ecosystem. I'm involved in a venture capital firm called 1839 Ventures, or through what we're doing in MediaTech Ventures.
Yeah.
Right. These narratives are going to give folks a glimpse of what we're doing
Yeah.
in this part of the world.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I think, South by Southwest is a great example of it. It's where technology and creativity and all these things come together. Data.
Yep.
I mean, it's really cool, and I think it is blazing a trail for the rest of the world. So, very cool things coming out of here.
Incredibly. And what's exciting is that the local buzz in Austin this year, and we've been having it for a few years, but the local buzz is that y'all realize Austin is always like this.
Yep.
Austin is always like South by Southwest.
Yep, yeah.
Not as big, of course. We have 300,000 people here for the next week. But we're always involved in live music, video games, film, data platforms,
Right.
mobile experiences, audio and podcasting, that you can head up the road tomorrow and go hang out with EA.
Right.
And go hang out with the IBM Design Labs
Right.
in Austin. That's the character. That's the narrative of Austin.
Yep.
That the experience you have during something like South by Southwest is why you should be here all the time.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
And you should keep Austin weird.
Yeah, we're trying.
Right.
We're trying.
Good. Well, listen, I really enjoyed our talk. Fascinating. I really
My pleasure.
appreciate you coming down here to share some of your insights and knowledge. And good luck to you with moving forward with all
Cheers,
this
John.
stuff.
Thank you very much. It's been
Thank
fun.
Conversations with Giants is produced by Eon Content Labs and brought to you by Epsilon. We see what others don't. All comments, discussions, materials, and information provided by participants in Conversations with Giants are strictly their own opinion and do not constitute any official position or views of Epsilon. Please refer to our terms of use for more information.